I know I was in Kenya, there is poverty there, but you can get immunized from it and immune to it and protected from it because the family wealth, you don't get to see the sights you shouldn't see, and you can live in that environment and not see it. When I went in, I saw a little kid of 5. Now, my own son was 5. He's now 25, Ricky, so this is 21 years ago. And I saw him and I said, where did he sleep? And there was this large iron water pipe, sort of a concrete water pipe. They said, that's his home. I said, but hey, across the road, there are cardboard boxes. Come on, don't tell me he can't get a cardboard box. They said, no, the slumlord will not allow it. I said, slumlord? They said, oh yeah, he's got to pay rent for that. This little kid gets up at 5 in the morning, runs off to the, he's the first in the scavenger with a rubbish dumpster, and he can't afford to pay that. No way. And then they took me to another part of the street, and I saw young girls who clearly only just hit puberty, behind cages. And I said, this can't be the same planet. The smell, the stench, the sights, I was deeply, deeply moved, and I came back onto the flight. It was Air France, first class. I couldn't touch the caviar, I couldn't touch the champagne. It just, like a fuse blows off. You just sit there thinking, what's going on here? And when I came back to England, I talked to Sunita, we shared about this thing, and we both agreed it was time to just take a complete paradigm shift in our lives. Let's just see what we can do. If you can't spend the interest you're earning, then what's it all about? And I was reading a book, a very interesting book that I highly recommend to you. It's by an American who is living in California. Not sure if he's still there, but the blurb at the back said he was at the time I read his book. It's called The Mustard Seed Conspiracy. It's by a guy called Tom Sine, a futurologist. And I was reading it. I happened to be reading this book the time I was traveling through India. And it was just making some amazingly simple points. He said, you know, people will say you can't make a difference. If you can make 1 pound of a difference, and 1 million people say you can make a pound of a difference, that's 1 million pounds of a difference. I said, yep, that works in my map. 1 million times 1 million pounds, yep, he's making a point. I visit projects. I was in Bangkok, and a guy turns up to this conference, and he says, the reason I've gone into developing world issues is because I ran one of those projects all those years ago. So it did make its own impact, and it was the young people who made that difference. And what this was about was engaging in dialogue with young people and engaging with them as well. So it wasn't just a dialogue of looking at the rich-poor divide on its own, but young people drawn in to engage in the dialogue. And, you know, some of the consequences were extraordinary. Young people volunteered to go abroad. You know, we had a competition. First prize, 1 week in a slum. You know, second prize, 2 days in a slum. And you got to raise your own airfare. And they did. They were queuing because they loved it. They want to make a difference. They've got the energy. They've got the drive. But how do we harness it? Are we in dialogue with them? And we draw from them and encourage them to do it. So that was critical enough. And looking at the rich-poor divide and looking at young-old dialogue and all that. The third issue that I want to bring to your attention is the need to be aware of cultural differences. You know, we talk of immigration, and immigration, one of the driving forces, referring to the previous point, is the whole economic imperative, how the rich-poor divide, the haves and have-nots, the economic migrant is a driver of that issue, and it affects, therefore, migration, and it is something that we need to be aware of. Now, this issue here is about cultural differences, and I want you to watch a clip from a DVD by South Asian Development Partnership that I founded with a few other British South Asian business people to address issues that affect South Asians in the United Kingdom and in South Asia, and to see what we can do to address these issues. I would say there is a subtext of suspicion. I can just put it that way, a subtext of suspicion within society. And that quote, which was just cut off at the end, I will read to you. And this was the Crown Prosecution Service, a guy called Nazir Afzal, who works for them. He says, and since 7th July, regrettably, there's been a significant increase in hate crime aimed at, you would think, Muslims. But these people aren't sophisticated. You know, the first place of worship that was attacked after 7th July was a Gurudwara, which is a Sikh place of worship. And the first person that was attacked was a Hindu. So they really don't care. If you look Muslim or you look foreign or you look different, we're going to attack you. That's what Afzal said in that DVD. You see, there's oversimplification. Shirking elementary homework often leads to oversimplification. Firstly, of the issues. If you take Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses, the issues are highly complex and technical. And then, of course, just an oversimplification in understanding the communities themselves. You see, there are differences between Muslim Indians and Hindu Indians, between the various strands of Islam itself, between Chinese people from mainland China and Malaysian Chinese, and it goes on. And these differences are ignored. Millions of people are lumped together as if the British, Dutch, German, and French were viewed as one cultural and ethnic group, or Texans, Hawaiians, New Yorkers, Californians, Mexicans, and even Canadians, all regarded as exactly the same. One of the first things I learned as a teenager when I did my gap year and worked in Oxford for my holiday job, and there was a group of American young people who came, and we all stayed together in this hostel. And I learned pretty quickly that there are differences. So the first question I tend to ask someone when I meet, and I know they're from the United States, is, which state are you from? You know, it's an immediate question. It's a huge continent, huge country. There are differences. You know, how much effort does it take to acquire an elementary understanding? And it leads me to my fourth point, which is overcoming fear. Because ignorance breeds fear. A lack of elementary understanding and prejudice often breeds fear. I recently attended an international colloquium in Toronto. It was on human rights and citizenship. Many delegates reported a growing suspicion in their own multicultural societies of refugees as queue jumpers, cheats, a threat to security, often with links to terrorism. And then along with that, a growing fear of difference was reported. Sometimes attempts to coerce alien cultures into conformity with homegrown ones. So in Holland, you know, they're doing citizenship classes. The sort of citizenship they teach is effectively trying to create citizens who comply with 19th century attitudes and values. You know, some that even the current Dutch citizens have forgotten and don't necessarily adhere to. I went to the colloquium in Amsterdam, another colloquium in Amsterdam, a government-to-government colloquium, and there, Mayor Cohen, who was the former mayor of Amsterdam, but at that time he was the mayor, he made this statement. He said, and you know, by the year 2020, Amsterdam is going to be a majority non-Dutch in population. I put my hand up. I said, Mayor, go ahead. Couldn't you see in Amsterdam in 2020 that was 100% Dutch because the definition of Dutch had changed? You know, in our pressurized multicultural societies, dialogue can be costly. You know, even for the white majority, it will involve moving right out of the comfort zone. For those in the ethnic minority communities, and you know, I get a lump in my throat every time I say this, it may seem impossible to have meaningful dialogue with people who reject your right to be members of your own society. I refer here in the British context to extreme right-wing political parties like the British National Party, who put out election literature during the time I was running, depicting members of minority communities in a hangman's noose. How can I dialogue? And then, of course, practical problems, as well as ideological ones. Who should we dialogue with? Ideally, the community leader. But who speaks for a particular community? Who speaks for a particular minority? Is it the old folk? The headship of the extended family? The accumulated wisdom of age and the last direct link with the mother country? Or is it the young generation? Often those most at ease with British culture and language, those with enough money to make their voices heard, those who've given thought to achieving a synthesis between the culture of their home country and their adopted country, and therefore are most inclined to enter into dialogue with the majority community. Or is it as a group entirely? The leaders of the faith community, for example, or those who run the minority news channels.